Which one of the interviews as we heard from Jay? So I kind of like in this class
Mhm.
quietly with his athleticism and stuff. Which one of the interviews kind of caught you? Wow, that's who did that? Austin, did you do that?
What?
You have ornaments around your Zoom.
Oh, look at that. I love it.
Oh God.
That's awesome. Thank you guys.
Okay. All right. Who kind of got your attention? Maybe not your favorite, but who kind of got your attention? You can get to your favorite
In
later.
terms of who I talk to,
Yeah.
I really like the group, so it's gonna be hard to pick one. But I mean, Claude Puma was just infectious. And I think in two different ways, his story is incredible in that he hadn't played football except for the last couple of years. He's a big time get. I mean, there is a lot of big time schools that went after him really really hard. And I think shout out to we couldn't talk about it on that show yesterday, but shout out to Trey Taylor. I know that was he did play a role in helping recruit Puma as well. So, but he just you can't help but smile when you're talking to him. He just has this kind of infectious personality, and just you can tell just a really appreciation for where he is. I also really like the demeanor of Danny Odom because I think he's got that
Kind of
kind of
intimidating.
swagger that you got to have to be able to be an elite defensive back, and another guy that's got a lot of appreciation for Addison Williams, Matt Rhule, for seeing something in him early. And let's see here. I also really like Luke Sorensen. I think he's going to be a guy that is going to work his tail off. He fits just that tight end room culture. And I just love his story too. He's new to playing tight end, and he had talked about how he actually was not a very good pass catcher when he started, but he liked the blocking part of it and was naturally good at that. He's had to work at being a better pass catcher, which is it normally flips that where you have to work on being a blocker, and the pass catching is more natural. So there's a lot of fun stories, and it was great getting to talk to those guys. And DB, I think we said it a lot on the show yesterday, and I do this show every single year, and I talk to a handful of these guys every single year. And while not taking anything away from guys I've talked to in the past, but there was a different feeling in the messaging that I heard from this group in particular, and just their belief and conviction in that they are going to come here, and they fully believe they're going to come here and compete for championships. And the kind of how they wanted to stand their ground talking about Nebraska, just to me, I think speaks volumes. So I think it's a really good group. And I think even though it's small and people want to talk about, oh, they didn't go get a very big group, I don't think that wasn't the plan. And DB, you said this multiple times, they were able to be very specific and target what they need. And so I think they got some really, really, really good pieces for moving forward.
I want to speak to that intentionality a little bit, and I always appreciate the network, and we want to give the network credit for the audio and information that the public gathers when we go back and talk about it. But I would encourage folks to go back and listen to all of it, but in particular, Coach Raiola and his sit down with Kyle, because I thought it was interesting for a coach that's kind of been maligned, and he embraces the negative narratives, and he has such resolve, which is one thing that I like about Donnie. You watch us interact, but he was, to your point about the specifics and intentionality. How about how when he's talking about hitting the benchmarks and the checklists, right? Like you say, smart or tough or the frame or this, or he checks all the boxes, right? Like when you listen to him, you can hear while the guys seem to rally and gravitate towards him as a position group, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think he doesn't get enough credit for how good of a recruiter he is. And he's another guy that when you can hear when these players talk about him, he's a big reason why they want to come here, and just the culture that he's built within that offensive line room. And I do think it was pretty specific because you've got three potential tackles where they've gotten really, really good guards. They needed to build some depth. And I think that's one thing we saw last year. They if another one of the tackles would have gone down at the end of the year, you're getting really, really thin at that spot. So, being able to build that depth from within, and I think they felt really good about the guard depth, and overall, I guess the depth. But then you went through it in a hurry, especially at the tackle spot when Gunner went down, and then you lose Teddy, and then you're kind of sitting here like, oh, I hope Turner or Pritchett doesn't get hurt, And while I know that Canuck came in and played well, but there's just, he was the backup guard, and then had to move outside. And while Coach Raiola trains that, I do think, building the depth at each position is important moving forward. And I think he identified, 3 guys that could potentially do that. And he talked about that specifically with Kyle and those attributes. And so, yeah, I think he got some guys that they're really, really excited about. And you just have to with the offensive line. They just don't go. There's not a lot of offensive linemen that go into the portal like some of the other positions. And when they do go in the portal, they're very, very, very expensive. And so you want to be able to rely on building from within. It's just a spot that guys don't leave usually, and not very many of them, and not the best ones. And so you have to be able to build that from within. And so each year, I mean, I think that speaks volumes to that there were 10 guys and 3 of them were offensive linemen, so that one year, it was my first year that I got here. The signing class did not have an offensive lineman. It was before Coach Raiola was here. And I think you see that year kind of biting this program a little bit right now in the last couple of years, because those guys would have been your juniors and seniors or your redshirt juniors and seniors. And those are the kind of guys that you want to be able to play on the line. Look what Henry Lutoski just did, that, and Justin Evans now has been in the program for a long time. And so I think you've got to be able to continue to add those numbers every single year in a signing class, because it just takes time to build. And then you just got to have that depth.
Oh, that's a good call.
Jess,
they went over that year.
Yeah, that was, and I think that's
Jess, you're old.
What?
Oh, nothing.
Oh.
Go ahead, Rob.
I think it's a really good point about how, especially in offensive line recruiting, the effects, much like Shane's responses, are delayed, right? Like it takes a little, it takes several years to see the results of missing on a class like that. I've watched it at different programs where if you hit a bad stretch,
we saw it happen to Coach Pelini with the year after Carl was let go, that D-line class for 2 years, flamed out.
In the trenches, like it bites you in a hurry, which kind of brings me to roster construction and management. I know you guys talked to Pat Stewart yesterday as well. I think that a lot of people don't totally know what his job is in terms of what his role is in things like what we saw come together yesterday. What have you been able to learn from him about his part of this whole process, whether it is the high school recruiting or the transfer portal?
Yeah, I think you could tell that he's very much going to communicate with what's needed for the program. Because I think that was where I was getting at a couple of the questions that I asked. I'm like, okay, do you have a specific number? How many defensive linemen do you want? How many offensive linemen do you want? How many linebackers, And he kind of pointed to the fact, well, it might change from year to year, but ultimately you want to get the best guys and then figure out how to build around those guys. And so, I think he had mentioned quite a bit, and DB might have mentioned this, but the fact that there is not as much clarity in the fact of, like, in the NFL, what the highest paid offensive tackle is, right?
Oh, that's a good answer. Yeah, you're right.
But there's not that clarity. So they can tell you, people can tell you, which is kind of what we're seeing a lot, I think, with especially the ill-intended agents this day and age in the NIL space coming in saying, well, and this is not just football. I mean, this is some stuff that I've heard from other sports, where from coaches from other sports, where you've got people coming in saying, oh, well, this program is going to pay me this, but you don't actually know what the actual number is, because there is no transparency in that. So there's no comparison in terms of, okay, well, what do we need to pay for the best offensive tackle in the portal each year, or whatever it might be. So I think that was pretty interesting. Whereas, and he talked about that change from the NFL to here, but I think ultimately he wants to make sure that he's managing in a way that you're getting the pieces that you need to be able to build around. And while that is his job to make sure that he's, checking all that off. And he's also, having conversations with the staff of what do we need. And I also think he just knows too, like he's an evaluator. And so he's going to be able to identify that. But then he's also one that he's taking calls from parents, from parents, and that's the question that, when he is talking about that story, that he got a little emotional about it, because it means a lot to him too, to be able to make sure that he's delivering on the promises when he's having these conversations with parents and the kids. So I think he's doing a lot of things, but ultimately it's making sure that you've got the numbers where you need it to be, and you're trying to identify in terms of just the what you have payment wise and the rev share and all that kind of stuff, just making sure that because you can't just say, hey, we've got $1 billion we can spend. There's a cap to it, especially what the athletics department can spend. And so you have to make sure that you're not going over that, and that you are able to, again, spread it out evenly to where you get the pieces that you need.
Interesting. You cover and are involved in so many sports. And Stuart said something about the numbers and more people and what makes it different than a 53-man roster. It is super eye-opening to, like, hey, when Pete Thamel or whoever gives you your alert on the House committee rulings are kind of when we know for sure. You're with all these coaches all the time. I always think wrestling, but I don't want to lead you that way. When you're looking at revenue share and success of sports, are there some sports in particular that you think, ooh, it'd be cool to get out in front of this in the NIL space based on how these rosters are constructed? Like, is there a sport that's flying under the radar that you think is impacted or can turn around faster? Football gets the most talk because it's the biggest revenue generator. But is there another one that you've seen pay immediate dividends?
Well, I think women's basketball obviously hit it out of the park with the trio that they just signed. And, we don't know, it's nowhere is it like, hey, this is exact the percentages that each sports are getting. You might know which sports are part of it and which are not. And then, there's the NIL aspect of that is added to it. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out with the ball bat sports, because of the investment that the SEC kind of programs make. Like, so the rev share, again, you can pick which sports you're going to divvy out that money to. And then, and I think for a lot of the like SEC schools, they're part of the rev share, the baseballs and softballs. Whereas I don't know if in the Big Ten, there is that much, and you have the best player in the country in Jordy Ball, but this is her last year. So what is that program going to continue to do moving forward? Not just softball, but baseball as well. It just is, I think that's going to be the interesting for me to follow, to see the impacts of that, just compared to what other programs that have, because other programs are not going to invest in volleyball the way Nebraska does, and so I think Nebraska's got a leg up in other sports that maybe other places are not going to put that kind of investment in, but especially with the SEC and their investment in some of those baseball, softball programs, and then comparing to maybe where the Big Ten values volleyball at a lot of programs, how that stacks up. I think for the most part, a lot of programs, a lot of athletic departments are investing in women's basketball. It's a huge growing sport. There's a lot of eyeballs on that in terms of TV. And, look at PBA and the potential for women's basketball to continue. Like they don't sell out consistently like the men do when they get to conference play, but there's more revenue that you can generate from putting a women's basketball team in PBA that sells out, so you have the potential to continue to make money on a program like women's basketball. And so I think that's kind of part of it too, is where can you, all right, we're going to invest, but then we're going to see a return in that investment. And so, I think that's where with women's basketball, if you continue to put a top 25 type of program, fans are going to show up. We've seen it. That attendance continues to grow. It continues to be in the top 10, top 15 every single year. So, and yet there's still room to grow in that, and that it doesn't always sell out. And so how can you make that happen to where you are continuing to see kind of a return investment on that? So I don't know. It's fascinating. We'll see. I think we're just out in the infantry stages of it to see how it actually impacts programs in the long term. But it's still, I think, too early to tell. But I do look at maybe the baseball, softball to see how that will continue to be impacted, especially in the Big Ten moving forward in terms of comparing to like what Oklahoma does for their softball program. So